Hello, test. I'm just trying it. Hello, test. Oh, bring it up, bring it up. There, thank you, Bob, thank you. We haven't had a good straw in the wind for a long time, and I think there's all kinds of straws in the wind. In fact, there's sometimes when I go out in the heavy wind, I can't believe the amount of straws that are flying by. Here's a straw in the wind. If you want to really know what's happening to our country vis-a-vis the rest of the world, I mean, let's face it, we're all Americans, right? I mean, and yes, you should have some interest in your country. Well, you want to know what's really happening in our country, in relationship to the rest of the world? Well, listen to this. I was really depressed, when I read this. Oh, wow, man. I mean, when I thought and usually straws in the wind come out of a totally unexpected source. I think there's a theory there, that there's a force at work that you do not expect. For example, the New York Times crossword puzzle to contain more and heavier truths about life and existence than, let's say, the latest endless prose effort by James Reston. But the truth happens to be there. That's where it is. Not in Reston, but in the puzzle. That's right. You don't want to face this, but it's the way the way life is. It's like you're going to find out more about the way a guy lives in his own personal life. Really, by looking in his closet, than by any other single thing that you can figure about the guy. He'll come out, he'll write this fantastic book and tell you the future of mankind. He'll walk around and make profound statements to Gabe Pressman. He'll, and then all you got to do is look in his closet and you see that gigantic pile of busted up shoes and broken umbrellas and blasted dreams, airplane models that he never finished. And all. You're going to know more about that guy. Then you're going to suspect anything he says when he talks about, we ought to get our situation here in this country organized in a sane and organically, basically realistic manner. Yeah, you hear these politicians. You look in their closet and you find that this guy hasn't organized his own life ever. And in fact, his mother has to come over every 2 weeks and clean out his desk before it blows up and kills him. Well, at that point, you'll know more about this guy than by his public utterances, right? Well, listen to this one. A straw in the wind out of Brussels. I didn't even know they had Belgium anymore. I mean, how long has it been since you heard of Belgium? I thought they did away with Belgium about the time they did away with the lower Slavovia. Do they still have is there a Belgium? Is it still working? Yeah, I guess so. For heaven's sakes, that's like getting a news bulletin out of Estonia. But is there still a Latvia? I guess so. But nevertheless, Brussels, Belgium, it says, and it really says about what our country, how it's going, how really it's going. Brussels police say 2 men arrested for a major burglary of a firm the other day told them that they had left $10,000 in the safe. They just left it. They didn't even bother to steal that. Quote, because we know that U.S. dollars are not worth much more anymore, sir. That's what they said. They were accused of taking 120,000 Belgian francs, which, by the way, is worth less than $3,000 in U.S. cash right now. They left $10,000 in cash, U.S. money. Well, there was a time, friend, when all you had to do was wave any dollar bill on any street in any city in Europe, and even the crowned heads would come charging out, willing to perform any service that you cared to name. Well, the thieves are not. That's where they know. Listen, the bookie in Las Vegas knows more about the future of unemployment in America than anybody at the U.S. Department of Welfare and State, because it's his line. You agree with me there, Bob? So the burglars sneaking in, busting open a safe in Belgium, leave 10,000 U.S. dollars as worthless. You know what this reminds me of? I hate to say this. It's a terrible fact. But when I was a kid, and I was stamp collecting, you could always tell the countries that were in trouble in the world. Their stamps were absolutely useless. Did you know that? Did you know that at that time you could buy like 5-pound bags of German stamps for 7 cents? Am I right, Bob? I'm not kidding. You didn't know that, see? And you could ask any little kid that was a stamp collector whether or not, what countries are making it and what or not. He could have told you right away. Germany and Italy are in problems. You could buy bushel baskets of Italian stamps for like what it cost to buy a used kid tennis shoe. And they were useless. So it's kind of depressing to realize that in certain countries now they won't even steal U.S. money. You can't press it on them. Oh man! Oh, how far the mighty have fallen! It's that. Of course, that type of logic is logic. That's the kind of people that open Oreo cookies and eat the middle first. You know, they lick the white stuff out and then put the little things back together again, and then put them back in the box. I've seen finks that do that. Oh yeah. Have you ever had anybody do that? You haven't. What kind of friends do you have? I guess you have upright friends. I had a curious experience one time. I was visiting somebody at this elegant house up on Fifth Avenue, apartment, say, and so this lady says, "Would you care for some chocolates?" And she handed me this box of actually it was a tray of chocolates. I said, "Oh well, fine. I'm not a chocolate type particularly, but she was so elegant. I says, all right. So I take the chocolate with the tea, and then I said, what the hell? Well, I said, these are very interesting. Yes, I always get these lovely cordial cherries. And, I'm gnashing away at the chocolate, and I figure, this thing has sprung a leak. And I look at the bottom, and sure enough, I can see a tooth mark. Somebody has neatly bitten into the bottom of this chocolate cordial cherry, with the juice in it, and sucked the juice out and put the cherry back in the box. So I didn't want to say this to her. I was a little embarrassed. And I said, oh, yes, these are very good, very good. And I figured, well, this must be a fluke. So I reach over and take another one, and then I look on the bottom, and there's 2 little tooth marks. Somebody had sucked the goo-goo out of every one of these in this elegant house. So everywhere you look, there's all kinds of hijackers that do stuff like this. Oh, yeah, they eat the good stuff out of everything. Okay. So did I tell you about this friend of mine? Yeah, talk about taking the good stuff out of places. This guy, he worked at a car dealership. Now, a car dealership's pretty nice, and he was like worked in the office, and he had occasion to work nights a great deal in the office, straightening up the books. They used this very unique double entry bookkeeping system, which worked okay for about 7 years. Now the whole crowd is in the slam. But he was working every night. So he used to, whenever he worked nights, he would sneak out into the lot where they had all these great new cars, brand new cars, and he would go out into the new car place. And he had the keys. Of course, the keys were all in the office. He'd take the keys to the new convertibles, and he'd sneak out there, and he would detach. All you got to do is reach underneath the dashboard. He would detach the speedometer, and he'd drive that fantastic convertible around, have a couple of dates, come back, and put it back in the lot, and then hook up the speedometer again. And he sometimes a car would be there a couple of months, and he would put maybe 15, 20,000 miles on these dates. So he was just like the same thing, sucking the goo-goo out of the cherries. Once in a great while, you see a little piece of truth. You never expect to see it in comic strips. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you that you get truth from Charles Schulz, and I say bourgeois. No way. You get it from comic strips, because that's to me that's the kind of stuff that it's just like thinking you're going to get the truth out of Winnie the Pooh. But if that's your bag, okay. But there's another type of truth. It's much closer to reality, and certain comic strips are never quoted, and yet they say it. And in one little one little comic strip. Once in a great while, a guy may have, a strip may have like 55 straight nothing weeks, and all of a sudden something comes out. Just 1 week, it comes out, and he never, one strip. And I am not a Beetle Bailey fan. Are you, Bob? Except listen to this strip. The Beetle Bailey once in a while. Yeah, I think you have to have been in the Army to honestly appreciate Beetle Bailey. And it shows, like a guy that reads the comic strips. I'm going to read the comic strip today. It's Beetle Bailey. And it shows the sergeant. He's always called Sarge. There he is. And they're in the barracks, and you see this ashtray with it's laying on a guy's bunk. And you see ashes, and you see a cigarette butt and a little smoke. And the sergeant is talking. He's got his stripes. And he's hollering over at the guy who's walking out of the barracks wearing his fatigues. And the sergeant says the following: "Hey, check your ashtray, Rocky. You don't want to burn down a barracks." At which point, the guy walking out of the barracks wearing his fatigue says, "Why not?" Now you see the sergeant. He's looking a little hurt around the eyes. And he's cleaning up the ashtray. And he says, "How can they feel so unsentimental about their home? How can they do that?" In the next scene, he is now straightening his tie, and you can see he's looking very nostalgic. Not only nostalgic, he's looking sentimental. He's looking sort of up in the sky, and he says, "When I think of the fights we've had in here, my knuckles fairly glow with the warmth of the memory." And the next scene, he's in the John now, in the latrine, and he's looking at all the sinks. And you can see the shower in there with the duck boards. And he is looking thoughtful, and he says, "How many thousands of feet have felt the tingle of that foot bath? How many faces have been reflected in them mirrors?" He's very nostalgic. I love that line. How many thousands of feet have felt the tingle of that foot bath? You know what that is. Now, you'd have to know about the Army. You got to walk through this foot bath to get into the shower. That's a theoretical attempt to kill athlete's foot and small crawling insects that occasionally get in guys' socks. Not only their socks. And now, the next scene, he's looking at the barracks, and he sees all the beds. He's looking at the floor. And he says, "How could they forget the jolly Friday night scrubbing the floors until the wood turned gray? And then the inspector finding dust in the funniest places. How can they forget it?" And now he's standing on the steps looking out over the parade ground. He says, "No, this barracks is not made of mere wooden nails. The true ingredients are the echoes of rosy dawned roll calls, the lingering essence of woolen socks just returned from a 25-mile adventure over dusty lanes." Now you see two yardbirds are watching him, and he's in the barracks, and he's turned on in the barracks it looks like a movie projector, and you see a tear coming down his cheeks. And one GI says to the other, "Oh, let's get out of here, them home movies again." He is looking at his memories of the barracks. Well, now, you're going to laugh at that. You're going to say, "What is this?" But only a guy who has lived in the Army can understand the curious attachment you eventually feel for your barracks. Now, this is, and when he says, that one line, he says, "How can they forget the jolly Friday nights scrubbing the floors until the wood turned gray?" Well, now that one line, anybody who's ever been in the Army knows exactly what he's talking about. And by the way, what did they call those jolly Friday nights, as he says? See, he changed the language because he knew you guys wouldn't understand it. Now, in the Army, they had a phrase for it. And I remember the first time that I ran into it. It's funny, when you run into the nomenclature of a special in-group, you generally misunderstand it when you first run into it. Like, for example, how many people today, and it's the word is so misused now it has no meaning. But you know that one of the great musician phrases used to be, "Man, am I uptight." Uptight didn't mean you were nervous. Uptight had nothing to do with feeling angry or bugged. What do you think uptight meant? It meant you were broke. Uptight meant you needed some dough. Well, some fool from Esquire magazine or someplace who didn't know anything about this heard the word uptight and thought that meant bugged, nervous. Am I uptight? Oh, wow. And so they began to use it that way, and now the word has no meaning at all because the word uptight had a specific meaning, very specific meaning. And these words get changed. They get changed until finally I'll never forget. The first time I heard somebody use a phrase which I knew very well meant, and I couldn't believe what they were saying, but they didn't know what it meant. How many times have you heard people use the word snafu? They don't know what it means. Wow. Snafu has a specific meaning, friends. And it doesn't have to do with what you think it has to do if you're that innocent. But nevertheless, I remember I came back from Chow. See, I was in the Army roughly, probably 3 days. And I came back from Chow, and I was all dressed up, brand new uniform, scratchy, very whole new world. It was very exciting, and at the same time very apprehensive, because you don't know who these people are. They're a whole different crowd, and they're very strange, alien guys, and they're running around. And bugles, whistles are going off, and it's a completely different world. There's no way, unless you've gone through this, there's no way to describe the first curious cultural shock of a whistle going off at 5:30 in the morning, and everybody running. Nobody runs in your house at 5:30, do they? I mean, like crowds of people running and yelling in their underwear. Well, it was a whole, I remember this vividly. So after about 3 days, it was twilight, and I had finished Chow. I was surprised, first of all, because you always hear one of the great myths about any of the armed forces, outside of the armed forces, is how bad the food is. I was amazed that it was good. It was better than most guys ever got at home. Consistently, it was. It really was, consistently. I have to say that if you were to take a year's Chow, it was probably better on the average. Because most people, will have 2 or 3 good meals a week, and then the rest of the time, they say, let's have meatloaf tonight, what the hell? Or, let's go and get a hamburger, Oh, no. In the Army, every night they had a whole thing, the entree and all the, the vegetables and everything else. So, yet it's a kind of a legend that you talk about the food is rotten. So we're sitting there and we're having this food, and it was kind of a great night. I'm sitting with these new friends of mine, all these GIs were sitting around the mess hall, and this corporal walks through. He says, "Hey, you guys," he said, "come on, don't get on the ball here. There's gonna be a GI party tonight." And I said, "Oh, gee, that's kind of great. It's Friday night. We're gonna have a party. Gee, that's kind of great." So we started to wander back to the barracks. We walk into the barracks, and at that point, going up the steps, a guy hollers, "All right, you guys, let's go. Let's strip it down. Time now for a GI party. Let's move it. Come on, get the lead out. Come on, move it up there." That night I discovered what a GI party is. GI party is spent mostly on your knees. And all the beds were pushed back to the walls, and they slosh. Certain guys are assigned to the buckets. They go and get the hot water with the GI soap. The other guys have those brushes, those GI brushes, and we simply scrubbed the entire barracks down for about 9 hours that night. Every conceivable thing was made clean. Well, I discovered something, the GI party. Well, these are curiously, now you would say that must be a real drag, because you think of it in terms of your house, the GI party. It must be a drag. But actually, there is, just like Beetle Beatty says there is a curious carnival air that develops during a GI party that is definitely there. And so one night, and it's like a whole bunch of guys. What you do, you strip down your underwear. Because you're going to get GI soap, water all over you. You don't want to get your fatigues wet, because you're going to have to wear your fatigues out on the rifle range the next morning. So you wear nothing but GI underwear and GI shoes, and you're all down on your knees scrubbing the floor until the wood is gray. You're working away there scrubbing. Well, one night an incident occurred in the GI party, which I have always remembered. It's funny when you get a bunch of guys together how curious the phenomenon of violence is and how easily it grows. There was a guy in our nobody knew anybody, remember. Nobody knew anybody in this space. We all new guys. There were a smattering of guys who had been in other companies and said you didn't know who was who. You being in the Army 3 or 4 days, you could have been in the Army 6 months because there were some guys that were regulars, who were going back through basic, all kinds of things. So we're having a GI party. It's about 10 o'clock at night. Lights out was about 11 o'clock at night, about an hour from now. And the light bulbs hang. They have naked light bulbs. We're scrubbing away in a barracks, and everybody's hollering. And it was a 2-floor barracks, one, two stories, one above the other. And I was on the top floor when this happened, scrubbing away. And guys downstairs are scrubbing, other guys are cleaning the windows. And it's kind of like, it is a party in a curious way. It kind of develops a certain, camaraderie. Everybody's running around pouring water and scrubbing away there, see. Well, there was a guy upstairs with me. There was about 50 guys upstairs. He was just part of the crowd. There was a little round guy that came from Oklahoma City. I always remember that. I'd never known anybody from Oklahoma City, but he came from Oklahoma City. His name was Spitzer. That's all I remember about him. He was from Oklahoma City, and his name was Spitzer. And he was little, and he was older than the rest of us. See, all of us guys were like teenagers, they're like 17, 18-year-old guys. And Spitzer, of course, he seemed a lot older than he was, obviously. He was probably about 25, but he seemed sort of staid and elderly to us. And Spitzer was a very quiet guy. He never said anything. For like 3 days we'd been out on rifle range and marching. Spitzer's very quiet. He's little, and he's quiet. And he's sort of gray. Not gray hair, but he just had a gray personality. You just couldn't relate to Spitzer. Well, in the middle of the GI party, somebody hollered out to Spitzer. I remember this voice. It said, "Hey, Spitzer, how come you wear that cookie duster?" A cookie duster. You know what a cookie duster is? That's a mustache. That's a slob talk for mustache. Often, they also use the word soup strainer. So he says, "Hey, Spitzer, how come you're wearing a cookie duster?" And you hear a bunch of guys laughing. And I'm down on the floor. I'm scrubbing away. I never have told this story because it's a curiously painful story. And Spitzer didn't say much. He sort of laughed. Now, here's where he made his mistake. He sort of, kind of glared around, didn't say much, and he's down on the floor scrubbing away there. And then somebody picked it up. Said, "Hey, Spitzer, how come you wear a cookie duster, huh? What's the matter? You afraid your nose is going to stick out like that? Ha, ha." And one thing led to the next. Just like that, it began to snowball. I had never been in anything like this in my life before, this curious snowballing. Remember, this guy's a stranger. Now, in the case of somebody having a hassle when you're with a bunch of kids, that's understandable. You know the guys, and it's got a long history. But have you ever had a hassle with somebody that's a total stranger over totally nothing? Well, that's the first time it happened to me. This kid says, "Hey, Spitzer, you got a cookie duster." Ha, ha, ha. And Spitzer's getting a little bugged about this. He's doing nothing. He's a little gray guy. He's down there scrubbing away. Well, at that point, there was a corporal in charge of us. He picked it up. This guy was from Tennessee. He comes over, and for some reason or other, he stood over Spitzer and said the following. "How come you don't answer these guys? Why don't you answer them? They're asking you a question. How come you're wearing a cookie duster, huh?" At which point, I could sense it's changing. Spitzer, because you don't argue with a corporal when you're a yardbird down on your knees scrubbing the floor. At which point, Spitzer sort of mumbled something. He said, "Come on, now stand up and tell us." Spitzer got up, and he said, "What do you want me to do?" So what do you mean, what do we want you to do? What are you trying to give us here? We ask you, how come you wearing a cookie duster? What do you say, guys? Ha, ha, ha. How come the cookie duster? And, of course, everybody says, "Yeah, ha, ha, whoa, whoa, whoa." And downstairs, they start hearing us laughing. A couple of guys come up and say, "What's going on up here?" And somebody says they're asking to Spitzer about the cookie duster. And within a minute, I never saw anything like that. There's a crowd of guys. There must have been about 75 guys. The barracks had that many easily. And they're all up on the top floor, and in the middle of them is Spitzer. And they're all laughing about his cookie duster. And instead of him laughing and saying, oh, well, what the hell, I got a cookie duster, he did the absolute wrongest thing. What do you think he did? I'll tell you what he did. Being a male, you could probably guess. Here's this little squirt in the middle of all of us, and I'm sort of in the middle of the crowd. I'm not doing anything. I'm just watching. And by now, there's everybody sort of joining in. Hey, Spitzer, what a cookie duster! Huh? Hey, let's take a look at that thing. What's the matter, kid? You know what? Well, you trying to look like you're Ronald Coleman or something? What do you think you are, huh? Errol Flynn, cookie duster. Hey, let's call him Cookie Duster Spitzer. And here he is in the middle of this thing, and he does the wrong thing. He looks at the whole crowd and he says, all right, you guys, what are you going to do about it? Well, the one thing you do not ask a mob is, what is it going to do about it? Unfortunately, with mobs, they always have a way of doing something about it. At which point, somebody says, what did you say, Spitzer? And he says, what are you going to do about it? The guy's practically crying. You can see this. He's scared like hell. And with that, it happened. Somebody grabbed Spitzer by the foot. Just reached, it was someone, we were a big circle. Some guy reached down from behind and just yanked his foot. And he starts flailing around, Somebody else then grabs his other foot and he flies over backwards. Within 8 milliseconds, there are 15 guys got his arms, 48 guys got his feet, and he's struggling, and he's yelling, come on, you guys, get it out, get it out. And it got worse and worse. Now, hey, Spitzer's got a cookie duster, yeah. And they're throwing him up and down. The guy's flipping. Well, as he's flipping, they got more and more into the thing. And somebody says, all right, hurry up. Hey, you over here. Go on down to the John. Get some shaving cream. Let's go. You get a razor. We'll show you what we're going to do about it. Oh, Spencer's got a cookie duster. Whoa. And they're cheering and yelling. And they hold him down on the bunk. About 37 guys. And the guy is going out of his mind. He's flipping. He's just, flipping his wig. And the guy's terrified, and they take the shaving cream. They take the thing and they squirt the shaving cream on it. They rub it in, and 2 guys, one on each side, starts to shave off his mustache with the razor. Well, of course, he is flipping, and he's getting hysterical. And at that point, he flips around, and as he does so, one of the razors cuts him literally from right under his nose, practically right up to the edge of his ear, just like that. And man, blood is all over the place. And now the guy is really hysterical. And the crowd doesn't know what the hell to do. They're holding him down and yelling. And it was a fantastic scene here. The blood is pouring off. And they're afraid to let the guy go because he was absolutely out of his mind. They figured, at that moment, the guy was like a raging wild animal. And the crowd was sort of stunned because the blood is flying all over the place, and they don't know what to do. And with that, suddenly, you hear this voice says, all right, at ease, what's going on here? At ease! And there is a captain of MPs who has he's come charging up the stairs. Somebody has called the MPs. He comes roaring up the stairs. He's got this big white helmet on, the 45 and the whole business, and the white belt. And he is a captain. It says MP on this big brassard that they wear. And he's got 2 MPs with him. And they stood the mob up against the wall, all of us, in our underwear. And here is this guy laying on the bunk with the blood pouring off of him. I don't know what it was about or why it happened. Everybody starts standing very quiet. And the MP sends one of the other guys down that was with him to get the ambulance, and 5 minutes later, they just take him out in an ambulance. He never returned to our company. And from that minute on, there was a curious atmosphere in Company K. And nobody ever mentioned it after that. Nobody ever mentioned Spitzer. And I'm probably the first guy who's ever brought it up. Because curiously enough, everybody felt rotten about it for years afterwards. Because this company was shipped out, we all hung together, and nobody ever mentioned Spitzer again. But at that point, I realized just under the surface of every group of people lies that man-eating shark. I don't know where Spitzer is tonight. All I can say for the entire company, Spitzer, wherever you are, Company K still feels rotten about it. Company K is still feeling the after effects. And I imagine there are times when Spitzer sits back and he can hear the distant wail of bugles. And he can see the dark shadows on the roof of a barracks. And I could see him answering people when they ask him, "You ever in the Army, Spitzer? What was the Army like?" I don't know what Spitzer could answer. But that wild night in Company K, when that blood sprayed across the barracks wall, a senseless act of curious, playful violence, and that MP that stood there with his legs wide apart and that big .45 service revolver hanging in that yellow light, saying, "All right, at ease, all you guys, what's going on here?" And nobody could tell him what's going on here. And Spitzer was carried out hysterical into the night. Yeah. Curious story. Please, if you will. Don't think that is an anti-Army story. You're thinking that's a story about the Army. That's the story of human potential. Don't you forget it. That'll happen in an office. That'll happen in a classroom. Yeah. That'll happen in the monastery. That'll happen wherever human beings get together, and that inexplicable spark suddenly ignites it. And then after it's over, nobody knows why it happened. Come on, sing it out. Come on, you soldiers, I want to hear you sing. I said sing.